got this great, great agency, not without some problems, of course, but very strong oversight body that actually hears complaints involving access disputes. So in our world in Connecticut, you don't have to go to court. In fact, you really can't go to court unless you come through the Freedom of Information Commission first. Many benefits to it. There's no fee to coming before the commission. You don't need a lawyer to come before the commission. You get to come and you get to require the agency who's withholding records to come before our commission. Again, it's an independent body. There's lots of procedural safeguards built into it, statutory safeguards to ensure that our agency doesn't answer to any one particular person, the governor, the attorney general, the secretary of the state. Lots of safeguards built into our law. But if you have an access dispute, you can come to the commission. We offer informal guidance. We resolve these disputes. They must be resolved within a year of filing, which in some ways seems long, in some ways doesn't seem so long, but we have to resolve everything within that 1 year time period. A big part of what we do, though, is mediation, and I think that kind of shapes the more substantive talk today about how to how to increase your success at access without having to resort to litigation.
I think so much of this happens, so much of the problems with the FOIA process happen before a requester actually submits the request, maybe because we're not clear about what to even ask for, or because the agency's record system is more of a garbage fire than we can even imagine. And that's usually not the public records officer's fault, but it's the reality. And so the first thing about, if you want to file a request and avoid needing a lawyer, is be careful about sort of emulating lawyers when you're actually crafting that request. I think one thing with social media, FOIA is really big on social media, which is awesome to see. And I think one thing we see a lot of times is sort of these big flowery public records and Freedom of Information Act requests filed by NGOs and lawyers and really great groups. And first of all, I'm very dependent on lawyers keeping me out of trouble that I get in. And I think it's a very important part of the process for public records. The caveat is that many of the lawyers I know who are fantastic when it comes to litigating FOIA requests are not great at actually drafting those initial requests. They start putting in a ton of legalese. They start kind of overwriting requests or kind of playing mind games with the agency before they've even submitted the request. And I see requesters who kind of mimic that language or kind of take a template they've seen from a national organization and start applying that to their request. And so the first thing I'm going to suggest is remember that there's a person on the other end of that line, that there's a person who's receiving that request. And just like if you get a long rambling email where you're not quite sure what the person is asking about versus something that's clear and concise and actionable, remember that that's going to go a lot further in terms of making it easy for them to help you.
Why does it take so long when the law very clearly states that we have 20 or 30 working days, depending on the circumstance, to reply to your request? So at DHS, we face two primary challenges that limit our ability to be as responsive as we would like: volume of request and volume and complexity of records. So as you may know, DHS receives about half of all requests in the federal government each year. Now, it's important to understand, though, that the majority of those requests are first-party requests for immigration records. People need those records for a variety of personal and often time-sensitive and important reasons. They may be applying for citizenship or some other benefit, or even facing deportation. The kinds of redactions that we apply to those records are pretty standard, and we have a process in place to move through them pretty quickly. Now, when you receive the volume of requests that we do at DHS, the unforeseen circumstances can turn into major problems.
It's important to be cooperative and respectful when you're dealing with agencies, but go after the records aggressively as well. These are records that you have the right to ask for, and they have a right to explain to you why they can or cannot give them to you. Be willing to help the FOIA officer in their job.
There was one case in particular that comes to mind where it was a bit of an any and all situation, but news article compilations, probably 20,000 pages of that. And we were able to work out with the requester that we would search for a particular term, give the requester that page where the term, showed up. And if they wanted to see more, they could let us know. And they literally were not interested in any of the other stuff. But it sort of illustrates the dangers that that come with sort of any and all very broad requests. You're going to get a ton of records come back from a search that aren't going to be useful to you as a requester. So it's important to kind of be aware of that kind of stuff going on in the background of these agencies.